Welcome everybody to the final session of this two-day conference. I've been here for both days. I look out here and I see a lot of you have also been here for both days, and I commend you. We're very aware that we're the final session, and so we're going to do things differently, a little bit differently than you've seen. I mean, the normal way that people do things like this is they get up here and one person goes for 15 minutes, another person goes 15 minutes, and then there's questions, and then, we always say, well, we'll leave questions to the end, and we usually don't. There's usually like 1 minute for questions at the end, and no one wants to go over late. This is the last session of the day. Please let's not do that. What we're going to do today is this. I have agreed with my panel. We discussed it, and we agreed unanimously that this is going to be a discussion, a question session, a session where we're going to feel free to be open with each other. We're going to feel free to discuss, issues that are on our minds. We're going to even feel free, if we need to disagree, though we're going to do so respectively, respectfully. But the wonderful thing about the Land Use Institute Conference is that there's a detente here. I mean, this is an opportunity for local governments, elected officials, developers to all come and learn together, chat during the breaks, get to know each other, enjoy each other's company. And to me, that's extremely, extremely valuable. And so what better opportunity to have this kind of conference and what this kind of session? This session is the developers' session. What I have assembled here is I've assembled a team of three great developers, working for three great companies. I'm sure that one point or another, if you're a local government person, you've seen them come through your city. It's one or at least one of them come through your city at one point or another. To me, these are the good guys, and I hope you feel that way. We will be the first to acknowledge that not all developers are good guys. We'll be the first to acknowledge that frustrations arise because of bad actors. We'll be the first to acknowledge even that we make mistakes here. But that's what we're going to try to talk about, and that's what we're going to try to get through. I'm going to make just a couple of brief comments, but before I do, I want to invite you to think about the questions you want to ask and the things you want to discuss. The discussion should hopefully flow naturally from what we're saying, but if there's one thing I know about the last session of a day, there's two ways it can go. It can go by fast, and it can go by slow. And there's not a faster way for a conference session to go by than an engaging discussion, and there's not a slower way for one to go by that everyone just sit there in silence and staring at each other. And so, you guys want to go home, let's make this happen. Okay? First, my name is Brent Bateman, by the way. I'm with the law firm of Denton, Durham, Jones & Pinniger. We have Krisel Travis here. Say hi, Krisel. She is with D.R. Horton. She is like super vice president of all things that are important and entitlements or something like that. That's your job title, isn't it? Something like that. We have Scott Lalli. He is the president of Destination Homes. Great developer, and although his title is president, he is still a person just like you and me. I've never been president of anything, so I admire him.
It's really, really great.
Awesome. Good. I'm looking forward to that someday. And Jason Harris is from Fieldstone Homes, and he has some title like that too, vice president or president or something. But he's as is the case with all three of these people. They're the ones at the developer that you're going to deal with, because they're the ones who are going to come to your city, and they're the ones who are going to enter into negotiations with you, and they're the ones that are going to get the entitlements that they need. Now, I just want to make sure that something is clear before we start with questions. And I'm going to start with the first question, but I just want to clarify something. As long as I've been in this game, this land use game, which has been a long time, it's been baffling to me why we can't get on the same page with local governments better. First of all, we all have the same goal here. We want growth that makes sense, that is nice, that is sellable. I mean, you don't want something that's not sellable. When I say you, I'm talking to city people in the room. You don't want something that's not sellable any more than these folks do, because sellable just means empty. We have the same goal, and we have the same concerns about getting to that goal. Right now, there's so many things going on. You know, there's water issues. We talked about that yesterday. There's affordable housing issues. We talked about that this morning. And we've all got to get there. Yet there's just so much tension. We did a session not too dissimilar to this at the Utah League of Cities and Towns conference, right? And we were there, and we had a developer panel here. Krisel was on the panel, and she said something, and I thought there was going to be a riot. I mean, the whole room just went, oh, and just like, oh, and they're like, what are you talking about, and everything. And it was astounding to me that we were just, over there just trying to, that amount of tension was just like a powder keg waiting to go off. It doesn't need to be that way. And I will tell you, if there's one thing that I've learned after all these years of doing this, there's one thing I've learned, is that the best developments for both sides, for everybody, the best developments come through cooperation, not conflict. I have lost the opportunity for clients for that. I went into private practice having 0 clients because I'd worked for the state for a long time, as many of you know. And some clients have come to me and they've said, I need you to really slam hard on these guys. I need to make these guys suffer. They're making me suffer, and I need to make you to make them suffer. And I tell them, I say, that's fine. I can do that if it's needed. I have done that. I've sued cities. I have done that. But that's not how you get a good development, in my opinion. How you get a good development is by finding a way to work together. With that in mind, I just want to tell you that developers as a whole have nothing against cities. As a matter of fact, we love you guys. And you guys should love us. You guys should love us because we're building your city, right? It's development and infrastructure and all that kind of stuff in our system has just been privatized. It's been privatized. And a lot of things that the government functions are not privatized and shouldn't be. Maybe some should that aren't. But this is one thing that's been privatized. And as a privatized function, you can't get private people to do that unless it makes sense to them, unless it financially makes sense. You can't lay out that kind of money and that kind of risk out of the goodness of your heart. You've got to be able to make a profit. You've got to be able to do that. That is what we do in America. That is the capitalist system. And yet we get called greedy. We get called, developers who don't care. Well, there are some like that, as I said. And some of that tension comes from that, right? There's no question. And some of the tension with developers towards city comes from difficult cities because there's difficulty on both sides. But the truth is that developers do not dislike cities. And thinking about it, I've narrowed it down to there's only 5 people at a city that developers don't like. 5 people, right? And if you're one of these, I'm sorry. But I'm going to tell you who those 5 people are, okay? The number one thing that a person at a city developer doesn't like is an ambitious planning commissioner. And what I mean by that is it's a planning commissioner who is more worried about the way things look than the way things should be. That is more worried about what are the people going to say about me if I approve this than they are about what does the law say, right? That is such a problem when that happens. The number 2, right, is a elected official, a city council person, who doesn't care about the law. In my years of doing this, I have been to many meetings and where people have literally said, I don't care what the law says, this is what I'm going to do. And what do you do with that? You know, what do you do with that? You know, these are property owners that have property rights, and the law, you know, should apply. You know, and maybe some of you have heard that too. The number 3 people at the city that everyone hates is the engineer. And that's all, just the engineer. Those guys are crazy. The number 4 person at the city that everybody hates. Well, here's the problem. Here's the problem with the engineer. The problem with the engineer is, and my wife is one, so I get to say what I want, right? Here's the problem with the engineer is engineers see things in black and white. They see things as ones and zeros, binary. They are not inclined to compromise. They are not inclined to settle. And that drives my wife crazy because my wife teaches engineering and her students are that way. And she has to work hard to get them to do that. So the number 4 person at the city that people hate is the city attorney who doesn't get back to you. None of you are that way, though. And the number 5 is a city planner who's afraid of their job. We love city planners. We love working with staff, but some are afraid of their job. Some are afraid that if they say yes, they'll get fired. And so they spend their time trying to find ways to say no to things. And that's not your job in planning. Your job is not to find ways to say no, it's to find ways to say yes. You get to say no if it can't be done, but if it can be done, you're supposed to try to find that. So I'm sure you all have a list of the 5 kinds of developers that you hate. You're free to share those with us, but for the most part, we just need you to know that developers love you folks and love to work with you and would love to negotiate and compromise and find a way to make something work in your city. Having said that, I've ranted on long enough, so we're going to look at the panel, and what I want to ask the panel to start with is this. What is the main obstacle right now? Is it the economy? Is it affordable housing? Is it sales and inventory? What is the obstacle right now?
You know, I think that the biggest challenge that we're facing right now is just the abrupt slowdown in the market with our sales pace. We've noticed since probably May. I think May. I didn't know that it was going to be as abrupt as it was, but by June, July, it was pretty apparent. And so, you know, it's posed some real challenges as far as what we're trying to do with our current inventory. I don't think I'm alone. I think a lot of builders, because of the way the market was, it took a lot of specs and built a lot of specs. And so we have a lot of existing inventory. It's impacting our starts and our philosophy about what to do there. And so right now, that's the biggest challenge, the biggest lift I have. I don't know that it has anything to do with development or cities per se, but it definitely is something that we're trying to solve for regularly and keeping a close eye on.
How's that changing what you're doing day to day?
That's a really good question. You know, so for us, we've paused starts for the last 90 days. We haven't started any homes for 90 days. We've stopped construction on a lot of our homes just to kind of try not to get out over our skis. And that's definitely, we've never stopped the machine before. It's always been, that was kind of taboo to ever have any kind of pause in the production cycle. But that's something that, you know, from a day-to-day standpoint, we're working through and trying to actively find ways to get back on schedule and get our trades back engaged. I have concern for our trade base and their ability to continue to keep their companies operating so that we can keep our company operating.
I agree. So the difference between us is I work for a production builder. We're a national home builder. So we have a huge machine and promises to the stock market. And so it makes it makes a lot of a difference. I agree with him that in May or maybe even sooner, we went from having 20 or 30 offers on a home to 0 offers on a home. We have 900 homes in our pipeline right now under construction. And our sales have not stopped, but they're not what they were and what we were used to. So I think that is a big challenge, but because we're a national builder and we've been here in Utah for almost 30 years now, we have an obligation to keep that machine growing. We have, in this up market, we have employed and grown from a small local builder to a national builder in this division that we're in. We now have probably close to 230, maybe 250 employees, and I think our concern is keeping them employed and making sure that they still have jobs because they have houses and homes, and keeping the machine going. So we have purposely stopped purchasing land at this point just because, well, I shouldn't say that. We're still purchasing lands. We're a buyer. If you've got a great deal and we can make it work, we will buy land. But we're very discretionary right now as far as what we look at and what we would put under contract. As the same with our production on the vertical side, everybody and the uptick in wages that we've seen is a good thing here in our market. We need that, and we want to be able to sustain that. But we also have struggled with affordability. So we want to find ways to bring our prices back down, besides the fact that the market's dictating that they come down. I think we've all dropped our prices significantly over the last little while to keep things moving. So we need to find the balance in keeping people employed, finding affordability, and keeping things moving forward. I love an app for that.
Watch just starts talking sometimes. I don't get it.
My name is Jason Harris. I mean, it's the same problem, right? That we're having just as same as them. I would say though the biggest problem I think I have that maybe I could be additive to the comments that have already made have to do with land use and the decisions that were made 2-3 years ago are what we're dealing with today. An example I'll give is just we've got several projects that are quarter acre, third acre lot, large lot inventory that at the time we were saying, hey, this is too much, the market needs more affordable housing types, and they were saying, well, people will buy them. And that was true. And guess what? Today it's not. But we're still stuck with the decisions that were made at that point in time. And so that's just a challenge. Is it impossible to overcome? No, but it's a real issue today when we have to look at what we do going forward. What is the right product and what is the right housing solutions for today? And they're actually still the same housing solutions that we needed before. We just couldn't get them. So that's just additive to the same issues that we're having.
Well, that segues to my next question is, what going forward is the plan? I mean, I don't necessarily need to talk about what we should have done. What can we do? What's the solution? I mean, sometimes we come to these kind of conferences and we spend an hour and a half talking, establishing there's a problem, right? And we've done that all day long. What ideas do we have? Where do we go next? What are you guys going to do next?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you're asking it because I think that's one of the challenges to these types of seminars is that we never get to what are we going to actually do about it, right? So we know there's a problem, I guess without knowing, I mean, we could go into lots of detail, but really high level, I guess a couple of things that come to mind for me is like we're sitting here in this environment, we come to city councils in something very similar, where it's like a judge and a defendant, right? They sit up high, they're out in front of us. We only have one opportunity, and it's after we've already played everything out with city staff, with our engineers, and then we come to a decision point. And we're just trying to defend our position that our project should get approved. And Scott actually brought this up in a discussion earlier, and that is, rarely do we have an opportunity to have a discussion with the real decision makers, which is the city council, early in the process. And it's only in an environment like this that we try to make decisions. And those decisions really need to be more collaborative and happen much, much sooner in the process, and be more open-minded in how that goes. That is a small part of the solution, but it's something where you talked about there's a divide, and we have a hard time coming together as developers and cities. And in particular, nothing against the planners and the engineers and things, but it's our access to the city councils, who are the decision makers. We are manufacturers. We don't get to make the decisions really at the end of the day about how many housing units are produced in our market. It is the city councils, and that a solution would be to start that much sooner with us. Just a thought.
I was going to say, some of the most successful projects that I've been involved with, and I've done a couple of very large master plans, are those where I've had the opportunity to sit in a 2x2 or to have an individual conversation, take someone to lunch prior to me appearing before them at my public hearing. Because I can address with you what I'm trying to accomplish, and I can address and you can tell me, what does your city need? What are your concerns? How can I help you? The most successful business model, whether it's building a city or building a company, is forming a partnership that open communications can happen, and we can be open and honest and know what your goals are to achieve and what my goals are to achieve. And then we can craft development agreements and things and zoning that helps us both to participate and achieve those goals.
First of all, Brent, thanks for asking such an easy question. What a softball. Yeah, I'm not going to pretend to know that I have the solution or an answer to this, but just building on what these two have just said, when we had this discussion earlier in preparation for this, something I've given a lot of thought to is the level of trust that needs to be developed between cities and developers. And, I thought a lot about it, and I thought, when was the last time as a developer that I've gone to a city that I didn't need anything from and sat down and tried to ask or understand what it is that they are trying to accomplish in their city? And, to be honest, that's the answer was I hadn't. And I think that, so there's a responsibility on our side as developers to do some outreach and to try to understand these different cities' objectives and where we're trying to build. On the flip side of that, as I thought about it, it's difficult to get access, as was mentioned. And, I think in order for us to build a better relationship of trust, we've got to be able to do that and have some face-to-face conversations and just try to seek to understand what each other's trying to do so we can build great communities. I really, truly believe, I know that everyone on this panel feels this way, and I think that the majority of developers in cities want to have great communities, and they want things to turn out well, and they want to address the pressing issues that are happening and work together to solve them. But sometimes it just doesn't happen because we don't have the kind of relationship with each other that we probably should have, and that's something that goes both ways.
Well, let's build on that for a second, because I have a question for the audience on that. And then I'm going to ask you guys a question again. What can these folks do? And when I mean these folks, I mean developers in general, in your opinion, to build that trust up? Yeah.
I just had a question about the conversation. Can you kind of expound on that, as far as there was a comment Krisel made about just conversations in general, right? Is that the discussion that you're or the conversation that you're talking about is, hey, what is your city or your municipality wanting to do? Where's the general plan? What type of housing? You know, where are you fitting? Or are you talking about direct conversations in terms of a specific development?
I'm talking about direct conversations. I was recently accused of forming a quorum with my city council members by sending a group email. And I thought, wow, really? I did? I've worked with this council for 7-8 years, so I consider them my friends, and we have built a relationship of trust. And when we started out in this community, I had the ability to sit with a couple of them. Now, I understand I can't form quorums. I don't want to form a quorum. But I do want to have a one-on-one, and I'm not excluding the city manager or the city planner or any of those people either, because a lot of times my experience is, well, you don't want to bring this in January because we just got a new council, and I'm not sure how they're thinking, right? On our end, the time is money. Every day that clock is kicking and interest is going out the door. So if I can't have access because a planner is nervous because they don't know how the new city council member is going to react, I would like to have that conversation with that city council member. I would like to tell them about my project, what I do, get to know me, and then find out what their goals are so that we can have those conversations. So like Jason alluded to, when we come before you at city council, you're up on a podium and there's a public hearing and we're down below. I want to come eye to eye. That's how partnerships are formed. I want to sit at the same table. So that's what I'm alluding to. Not alluding, that's what I just said.
And I guess that's the question, is how do you do that without violating the law, right? The people you're talking about have an obligation. They're going to be potentially acting on something that you're asking them to do. And the public under the law has a right to know that. So I don't know if it's work sessions that are built around, or open planning sessions that, you know, are there, or what else. But that's the dynamic that's why you have, I guess, this difficulty, is to have that type of access is tripping upon the requirement to have open meetings. To make the decisions.
I'll interject here, and I'll let all the other attorneys in the room correct me if I'm wrong. But a single meeting, a meeting with two councilmen discussing anything, there's nothing illegal about that.
Yeah.
Right? When you get a quorum, you have to have an open meeting. The public has a right to know. But you don't have to have a public record of every conversation. And you don't have to, unless they're doing like a quasi-judicial role, right? Unless they're looking at an appeals role, there's no ex parte conversation prohibition. And so that leads to the question: is what really is the impediment to that kind of access?
Well, just a comment, Brent, and that is, I don't think the issue is whether we can comply with noticing or quorums or those sorts of things, because we actually don't have a problem with that. It really is the issue of access to and just getting the audience so that we can have the conversation. And it is both. It is a direct conversation and it's general too. When I've gone to a city, and recently I've done this in several cities, and said, hey, what can we do to help you with this moderate income housing thing, right, that you're all working on? And the answer that comes back most often is, well, I mean, it's up to the council, right? And it's like, okay, well, how do we get to the council, right? It's not easy. I did see a hand in the back.
Bill.
It occurs to me that developers, what they crave in the process is predictability. And those 5 people that you mentioned earlier, Brent, that developers hate, the reason why they hate them, I don't have to check. The reason why they don't like those people is because they instill unpredictability into the process, which means more time, which means more interest, which means less profit. And that's why developers are doing what they do. In addition to building great communities, they hope to get a profit, which is fair. But you also said, Brent, and I'm putting this up back on Brent, not you guys, on Brent, that the best outcomes are found through an iterative and collaborative process, which involves a degree of unpredictability and creativity and working through different kinds of difficult problems. In addition to the fact that, and this is for the engineers that may be in the room, each site has its own individual and unique attributes that are difficult in some cases to overcome. For example, slope issues, drainage issues, wildfire interface kinds of issues. So in addition to all of these pressures that we're getting politically, we have technical issues that we as staff have to deal with that are not necessarily predictable as well. In light of all of these, and in spite of all of these conflicting ideas, I don't know how to instill more predictability into the process other than to have the state say on the state level, thou shalt do thus and such in every instance. And that's hard to do because that takes away the individual character of the community and the self-determination that local communities crave. So I think this is the source of all of the conflict between the two. The developers want the predictability, and the communities demand flexibility.
I think that's a great summary, and if anybody is wondering whether or not I was joking about engineers, I was. Okay, I just wanted to insert a little joke in there, but I think you've summarized it great. And my response to that, and I'll let these guys respond too, is there's no way to eliminate the tension. There's no way to eliminate the conflict because, I'm up here preaching, we all want the same thing, right? Well, a sword gets forged by beating the crap out of a piece of steel, right? And sometimes that kind of tension and conflict, we can't avoid it. I was reading today about a NIMBY situation that I heard about where someone wanted to build a theater, and they'd started construction on this large theater, and one of the residents, who happened to be very powerful, came home to find this theater being built and just jumped in and did everything they could to stop this theater. I mean, the ultimate in NIMBYism. And they had petitions going around. They lied to people about what they were signing on the petitions. They spent a ton of money, all to stop the building of this theater. And the theater was the Blackfriars Theater, and the builder was William Shakespeare. And the neighbor, who was 200 feet away, was the Countess Elizabeth something or other. NIMBYs have always existed. There's examples of NIMBYs in the Bible, right? This conflict is natural, right? The question is, what do we do with this conflict, right? And does this conflict make us worse, make us angrier, which is what we had during the lunch session today. We talked about how this tension makes us hate each other, right? Or do we take that tension and we use it to collaborate and to try to make a nice product in the end? And I've seen it both ways.
Just a comment to that, and that is that I think I disagree on the predictability side. We're actually masters of the unpredictable. That our lives in building homes, it's never predictable. And so I don't think it's that. I really do think it is. Brent mentions these 5 people. We can work with any of those 5, actually, and we do on a regular basis. It really is, and one of the things is that we just having the chance to have the conversation, to overcome the unpredictable moments. That's a real challenge for us on a regular basis.
Speaking of predictability, let's talk about the amount of risks you guys have to adopt.
One question out there.
Oh, did we?
Take that first.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Rob. Yeah.
Brent, I have a couple of thoughts. You asked a really good question. Just a couple of thoughts. I think part of the problem that we collectively, I'm a city attorney, that we collectively have is that most of our current ordinances And all of the training virtually that planners receive at the university level, and lawyers in law school that study land use. Very little is taught about negotiating land through agreements to develop land. It's all still based on Euclidean zoning. And so there's just not a fundamental shift that's been made in how we need to develop land. I don't know how you address that other than somehow get to the universities and say, you gotta change your curriculum. Because it's very uncomfortable. You have a planner or a lawyer that comes out of law school, and they've been taught that there's this code, and a developer comes in and they say, I want to do X, Y, Z, local code, and it doesn't fit. Oh, what do I do? That is just not the way land development occurs. So that's one thing that I think somehow that needs to change. The second thing that I've observed over the years is that the professional staff is very committed to their entity, and they want to do what's right. And many times they're hesitant to engage in the kinds of conversations that really need to be engaged in because they're outside what the code says now or what the past practice has been. And elected officials are sometimes a little bit inconsistent about how they respond to that. And a lot of that, I think, can be dealt with to some extent by the leadership, by the mayor, the city manager, maybe a good council chair. But that's part of why I think developers see what they see with engineers or whoever not feeling uncomfortable. Another thing that I think could happen is just to remember from the development side that every 2 years the city council changes. And as a city attorney who's represented 4 different big cities here in Utah over the years, it is tough to help a city council understand that it's okay to invite a developer to come in right at the very beginning, lay their map out on the table and say, council, here's 5 things I want to ask you. There's really 2 or 3 questions that I think developers need to ask right up front of a city council. Are you willing to entertain the kind of density we're talking about? What are your infrastructure capacities? And if you can have that conversation right up front, that's probably going to solve 80% of the controversy that occurs. But that's a hard discussion for a staff to have unless they've got some leadership that is okay with that happening. And I guess if I was a land developer, the advice I'd give you is the first thing I do is I ask the staff, what does this zone that I want to build in now allow? How far do you think the council would go with density? And show me the documents, not just what is your infrastructure capacity, but show me that is in fact the capacity. And if that doesn't work, and you think you've got a good idea, Gary Crane's probably going to cut my head off, but I'd say, call your mayor, call the city manager and say, I'd like to come in and just talk to you. I worked for a city once, the city manager, I won't say what it is, you might be able to guess, but told the planning staff when a developer comes in with a good project and it doesn't fit the code, don't say, I'm sorry, you can't do it. Say, that's a great idea. Let's talk about what would have to happen to let that happen. And that was the mandate that city manager gave. Now, that doesn't mean every developer got their way, but it sure gave the staff the opportunity to feel free to at least begin those conversations.
Great comment.
Another comment?
Charlie.
I handed the microphone to Bill and realized how much I like the feel of it. I couldn't echo this anymore. I think it was a really great statement, something that I think we try and strive for. A lot of us try and strive for. When you're working with lower level planners, a lot of times it is, by the book, because the innovation or reaching outside, there's just a level of discomfort in doing that. So I think it's making sure you're working with the right person who's got the level of experience to actually think outside the box. But beyond that, I've got 2 things from a practitioner's perspective of what makes me distrust a developer. And there are very few developers that I've met that I don't trust. And one of them is when they schedule meetings with people above me without talking to me. Complaining about what it is or, looking outside the box, whatever. The best thing that a developer can do is say, hey, Charlie, we're in a disagreement on what this issue is. I want to go talk to the commissioners or the city council members or the mayor or the city manager. And I would like you to be there. Or I'm going to talk about it, but I don't want you to be there, and then you guys can talk about it later. That kind of thing really helps, because on the inside, there might be some things that I understand that the developer doesn't fully understand. They go straight to the commissioner and say, this is how we want to do it. The commissioner says, yeah, I think it's a really great idea. And then it gets in front of them in a public hearing, and they go, whoa, 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 Charlie's saying, well, here's all the implications of their really great idea. I'm gonna have to tell this guy no. It could have just gone a different way in the first place. And the second thing is when I'm working through a negotiation with a developer, if I feel resistance in providing metrics of accountability, so through a development agreement or whatever it may be, if a developer is pushing back pretty hard on wanting to be held accountable for doing what they're saying they're going to do, that's one of the very first things that I'll do.
Elaborate on that a little bit. What does that mean?
I'll give you a good example of what to do. Working with a developer on providing some moderate income housing. And they've come up with I think it's a pretty cool plan as long as the market works. I think it'll work out for them to do what they're going to do. But I think that there's a lot of possibility, maybe 50-50, that they get to 95% build out, yet they've only got maybe 2% moderate income housing that was required of them. And so I asked them, well, how are we going to hold you accountable for making sure, I don't want you to get to 95% build out and say you're not getting a single other building permit until you go and build all the moderate income housing. And so I said, well, here, we'll put up 10,000 square feet as collateral. And if we don't execute fully to the 100%, you guys get the 10,000 square feet, free and clear, do what you want to do with it, give it to the housing authority, whatever you want to do. That's great. That's the solution to the problem. And so finding solutions that will help execute the final product. Some of us, I think a lot of us, at least my age or so, we cut our teeth at the trough of the recession, right? The developers were the enemy at that time because they had circled the wagons and they were not letting go of whatever little bit of money that they had left over. And community be damned. And it took 5 years before the song changed. And so it really helps go a long way for a developer if they come to for me, if a developer comes to the table with a little bit of skin in the game and is willing to be held accountable for that.
That's a great comment, Charlie. You guys have any response to that?
I think it's an amazing comment, and I speak for us. I mean, I think through some of the situations where we've come to compromise with cities on something, and that's usually what has happened, is you have a development agreement or something that has some accountability in it. And I know there are bad actors in the development world, but I think that when you're intent on doing what you said that you would do, we don't have any problem ever signing something like that makes sense to ensure that we're going to perform in the way that we agreed that we would.
That's one of the benefits of a productive discussion with the city, as you get to there. Derek?
I entered the public sector about 10 years ago through UTA and then now in Salt Lake County. And one of the things that I felt a lot like you guys coming into this universe where I spent my full days of employment trying to tell elected officials who were interested parents who would become elected, or maybe they operated a business and were very successful that was not in development or real estate. And I've spent the better part of my 10 years educating people on elected officials on how and what is appropriate in terms of considerations or profit, or how much money is a developer, what's an acceptable amount of money for a developer to make. And so it's been interesting in my current role to notice that those folks are relying so heavily on me as the real estate director to be coaching them and to be able to give them this information. And so I think it's two parts to the conversation. One is there's probably needs to be a forum where you can create an environment where you can speak with elected officials on a much, much broader base. Like, you guys are the large developers in town. There's 1,000 small developers trying to gain the same kind of access that you're getting. And so having an environment where you can coach, where you can train, and where you can develop city leaders into an understanding of what we're trying to do. I mean, that seems to me to be something that we're doing from the staff level daily to try and help them understand You know, what's Salt Lake County gonna do with its real estate? We're not growing any more of it, right? So what we have has to be protected, it has to be preserved, and has to be managed. And that's the direction we're heading. So I think that's one level that you guys could consider as the development teams and the planners that are out there coaching people. And then the second side of me is the empathetic side to the politicians, which is I had no idea, being in the private sector when I was developing, coming in, what that politician has to deal with on a day. You know, going from health concerns and issues of COVID to, you know, a developer trying to get a development through. And so their brains, you know, it's this elevator pitch time frame that you got in front of them to really establish the base of what you're trying to get to. And so those are the challenges. I don't know that that gives you an answer or a solution, but it's been a recognition that I've had in the course of, you know, my now new career. And it's been very helpful for me to know those components as I approach them, because it really makes me rethink what's really important when I go to them. I'm really going to only get a bullet point kind of conversation. So
It's a great comment, Derek.
I appreciate the comment that was made about coming in and asking what the city's priorities and goals are and how developers can help meet them. I think one of the things that I've noticed, we met with a developer maybe 6 weeks ago who he is proposing a project, and he asked, well, what can we do to get a more favorable reception to this? And I said, well, have you checked the general plan, and are you responding in any way to that general plan? In my time at North Ogden, I haven't had a single time in which a developer's come in and they started the conversation about the general plan and how their project responded to the general plan. And I understand that there can be concerns with general plans, but it is also this representative will of the people of the city. And so, you know, it's been surprising from just a persuasion point of view. Like, the city's gone to all this trouble to adopt this set of goals and priorities and plans, and developers, understandably, they know what the market is for their business model and things like that, but they often don't even respond to the general plan. They come in with a private vision and don't say how it overlaps or even try to make the case how it overlaps. But on the other hand, one of the suggestions that I've made as city staff in the past is that as we're crafting our our general plans, we have to be inviting developers, and particularly the regular developers in the city, to those meetings, so that that they're aware of what's the content of those, and there'd have to be parameters on how this were to occur, but that we can also do some ground truthing for whether that, what sort of priorities work for to be profitable for a developer, and so we can find a way to get something that's legitimately determined by the city and represents their interests, but also is actually buildable. So,
What would you do if you got invited to a meeting like that?
Well, I'm also, somebody talked about hats, so my other hat is I'm on the Utah Valley Home Builders Board, and so we actively encourage everybody in the cities to invite us to those discussions, to those meetings. We have a government affairs committee where we can come, and it's made up of real estate people and developers and attorneys, and we would be more than happy to participate in those. We encourage them. And I was also back on Brent's original questions as far as hurdles. One of the things that we find as obstacles and hurdles is cities not staying on top of those general plans. We appreciate those general plans, but sometimes you go into a city and it's been 15, 20 years since it's been updated. Or you've got a code that you wrote in 1995 that said it had to be an all brick house because that was the trend back there in 1995. And I know that city staff is already overburdened, but keeping on top of your general plans, your zoning, your ordinances, so that when we come in, we can build what the market's demanding. We've had projects where we've had to go in and actually change the code so that we can build the farmhouse because I had to have 70% brick on the house. Well, a farmhouse style brick is not 70% of the house. Now it can have brick, but so those are one of the things that we see is the cities, if we can stay, and those that stay up with their general plans and their zoning and their ordinances are more favorable for us to come into and develop, because the time is the money. So
just to comment on that too is that one of the biggest challenges I think that I have, and they can chime in themselves, is that actually that the city councils fully understand that they don't have to follow the general plan. I can think of more times than not where we've come in and said, hey, we'd like to do this, and it complies with the general plan, and to be turned away by, no, the city council, that doesn't really matter, right? One which I just did just last year was 5 to 10 units per acre in the general plan, and we got 2.7. And then just last week, I went back to the city council because they mapped their entire city to exclude ADUs, and we were trying to change the ordinance to allow our one subdivision to have ADUs, and somehow the concern was that we'd add too many units. It's a real challenge. Land use, I think, is the single biggest issue, because land use is something that is completely discretionary, and we as manufacturers of housing, we don't have any discretion. We are required to follow those rule books that are put in place, and we don't have a problem with that. But what we find is over time, to fix a problem, we add another rule. To fix the problem with that rule, we add another rule, and we overregulate to the point where there is no creativity any longer. We can't just approach things from what is best for the community or best for the project. We are now approaching it from how do we navigate something that has so many rules that now it doesn't make sense anymore. And then add on top of that, we only have to follow the general plan if we feel like it. That's a real challenge.
Our experience, we were blessed with a complete changeover of city government, and at the same time was a first-time introduction to land use ordinances.
I can't tell if you're being sarcastic or not.
That's accurate. So we had a fledgling government, and we had a new developer that was new to developing, and we experienced them wanting to come in and change every land use ordinance that was adopted to meet their development. And after a lot of frustration, it was kind of introduced, why don't you use a plan development overlay and just make an agreement to build this master plan development. And that kind of shut down some of that. Out of that chaos came a couple learning points that we adopted. And one was that we kind of expanded our public comment section and went innovative with a 10-minute informational summary, and giving the developers or the stakeholders in the community, if they presented in a PDF format in a timely manner, it would be included in the packet without limit to the PDF, but they would be given 10 minutes of public comment, and it would be treated as public comment. But they would be given an opportunity to give project updates or something where they didn't especially want an action item on the agenda or something. They just wanted to have access to their elected officials for informative involvement. So that was something
That's interesting.
we did.
Have you seen that result in a nightmare of a meeting yet, where everybody in town wants to be in that 10 minutes and?
Oh, actually, once we created a solution for them, then they quit commandeering the 3-minute public comment, and then they quit commenting.
What city are you from?
Philadelphia.
Oh, awesome. I've been there. I'm going to come and check that out. I'm going to watch what you do down there.
Brent, just a quick comment. A lot of cities have implemented some form of a development review committee.
Yeah.
Where the developers can go in and informally meet, and those are all good. Some of them are more effective than others. The ones that are quick, where you don't have to wait a month or two to go to that, work better. The ones that are optional not mandatory, work better. And then the ones that include at least one elected official on the development review committee are the best ones, because so often you'll go and meet with the staff and you'll have the planner and the engineer and someone from the city manager's office and maybe the fire chief, and you'll have everybody there and you'll kind of get things figured out. And then you go to the elected officials and they say, well, there's a disconnect between our staff and us. You know, and I get it, they're responding to political pressure. Of course they are, they're elected officials. There's nothing wrong with them doing that, but I think when you can have an elected official present in those conversations, they can then go communicate to the council and say, well, as an elected official, let me tell you what my perspective on this was and how we got to where we are. So just something for developers and cities to consider.
You guys, is he expressing you guys' feelings about DRCs? I mean, would you say about the same thing?
Well, I feel like I've been in a lot of cities. I've never had an elected official on a DRC, so that's new to me. It's a challenge.
I'll give you an example. Tooele, a friend of mine just texted me, and I can give you a lot more, but Tooele has their mayor, a member of the city council, and they rotate through, and then a member of the planning commission, and then staff, all relevant staff. So that you have someone at every level who's kind of representing and part of those conversations. And
that would be super helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that really would save a lot of consternation.
Well, and I would just add to that, DRC, the developer needs to be at the table. There are cities that have DRCs, and the developer is not invited to that DRC.
Oh,
jeez. So that's been my experience. It's rare.
There's nothing like a group of people talking about your property without you there, right? That doesn't work.
So I would say
There are some due process issues there.
That the developer is included and allowed to be at the table. So yeah.
We have about a minute. Any other questions? Do you guys have any last comments?
I have one. I heard a really great quote earlier this morning. I wrote it down. It's not complicated. But it's a Winston Churchill comment. It says, Americans will always do the right thing only after they've tried everything else. I feel like that's our world right now, right? We're in a housing crisis. It's actually been a crisis for a long time, so it feels like it's now more than a crisis, and I don't know what to term it. But we keep doing these things, right? And at what point will we come to and do the right thing and address land use and work with the developers and we need to work with the cities? I mean, at what point does that happen? We're ready. I know these guys are ready, and we really do want to do the right thing. I view my role. I'm the vice president of land acquisitions for my company. Without land, without the entitling a lot, there are thousands, probably tens of thousands of jobs that are affected by that one lot that's created. And I worry, like Krisel was talking about, I worry about my team, but I worry about our subs. I worry about all the other industries that are affected by the housing crisis and the lack of housing, which we already had. And now it's even greater. That keeps me up at night as a developer. Like, this is not just, can I get some more land? This is an entire industry of people who, I'm not a prophet here, but look down January 1, look at the home building industry and tell me if it hasn't just completely imploded. There's a real problem, and we're just steps away from that. And there are things, Brent, that we can do. There are things we can do right now, but we have to act fast.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your participation. See, it goes by faster, doesn't it? Thank you.